All right, good evening, everybody. We're going to give everyone a few more minutes or a minute to keep coming in here, and then we will get started. I know it's 6 o'clock where I live, 7 o'clock East Coast time. So I know this is an interesting hour and it's been a full day. So we'll go ahead and get started and try to stay on track. But thanks everyone for joining us. And welcome to PWSA's first Sleep Summit and our last presentation for the day. It's been an amazing day. I'm Paige Rivard, I'm the CEO of PWSA and mom to Jake, who is age 12, living with PWS and sleep issues. Like I said, we've had a fantastic day today. So far, we've had 5 great presentations with several recognized sleep experts in PWS. We've covered everything today. We've covered REM sleep, central apnea, obstructive sleep apnea, excessive daytime sleepiness, cataplexy, narcolepsy, and much more. But it's been a great day. There's been a lot of engagement, a lot of questions, and we're looking forward to our last presenter here this evening. And just a reminder that we will have, you can type your questions into the Q&A section. We have turned off the chat box. And this session, as well as all of them today, will be recorded and available on our website, on our YouTube channel, etc. And lastly, just really quick, I would like to say a thank you again to Harmony Biosciences for sponsoring and making our Sleep Summit available to our community. And again, it's just been a fantastic day. I would like to turn it over to Stacy Ward, our Director of Family Support, to introduce our last speaker in the presentation for today. Stacy?
Paige. It is my pleasure to introduce to you all Aliana Weavers, who is a master's student at the Chicago School of Professional Psychology. Aliana is going to be presenting today on assessing the efficacy of an applied behavior analytic treatment protocol to treat sleep concerns in children with Prader-Willi syndrome. Aliana is studying to complete her degree in applied behavior analysis. She completed her undergrad studies at McMaster University and currently works in the field of applied behavior analysis with children with autism spectrum disorders. Aliana's research interests include the application of behavior analytic intervention to rare diseases such as Prader-Willi syndrome, and she is currently involved in several research projects on this topic at the Chicago School. Her master's thesis focuses on the implementation of a behavior analytic treatment protocol to treat sleep issues in children with Prader-Willi syndrome. Aliana, thank you so much for being here. We so appreciate you joining the PWS community.
Thank you so much, Stacy. Thank you for having me. So like Stacy said, my name is Aliana Weavers. I am a master's student from the Chicago School of Professional Psychology. And thank you for coming to my presentation. So we are looking at the assessing the efficacy of an applied behavior analytic treatment protocol for children with PWS. So just going to go through what our agenda looks like for today. So we're going to go over an introduction to applied behavior analysis, just so everybody has a bit of a background on that. We're going to look at treating sleep problems in children with PWS, look at some of the previous studies with sleep and autism spectrum disorders, looking at some current data, and we are also going to go over some strategies for parents. So what is applied behavior analysis, or ABA? So applied behavior analysis, behavior analysis specifically, and just involves the behavior of organisms. So animals, people, things like that. It's just more of a broad category. Applied behavior analysis more looks at the study of human behavior. It's best known as the science behind therapies for children with autism spectrum disorders, and also covers the study of learning, the laws of behavior, and then any factors impacting behavior, such as what happened before the behavior, so an antecedent, and what happened after the behavior, so a consequence. Let's look at some behavioral interventions for sleep in autism. So what my study is based on. First, we'll look at Jin et al. From 2013. So they individualized sleep treatments based on the parent reports of concerns that their children had with their sleep issues. So they looked at children diagnosed between the ages of 7 and 9, so all with ASD. These sleep treatment packages addressed when children fell asleep after being put to bed. So that's called sleep onset latency. If you see that in the future, that's what we're talking about. And then sleep interfering behaviors. So those interfering behaviors could include yelling, crying, things like that, getting out of bed to go and play with toys, the like. They used infrared cameras to watch the children to collect their data during the night. And all 3 participants had successes in decreasing their sleep interfering behaviors and sleep onset latency. Mallow et al. From 2016 used educational materials to teach parents how to teach their children to sleep better. So giving their children some more independence in getting themselves back to sleep. Parents were able to follow modules throughout the weeks that the study was going through. Each module had corresponded to a different topic, and then parents were implementing those practices at night for their children. They also found decreases in sleep onset latency and overall improvements in sleep quality. They also did questionnaires before and after and were able to show that there were improvements on those sleep quality questionnaires. Sandberg et al. From 2018 also taught parents to implement bedtime routines with response cost. The response cost just involves the child no longer being eligible to receive a reinforcer. So that could look like chocolate in the morning or access to a tablet for a time before school. The child was no longer eligible to receive that. In ABA, these are used as a last resort as interventions. After interventions, all other possible interventions have been attempted. If all else fails, then we go to these ones, but these are not generally the first ones that we try. They tested the intervention on the effect of decreasing bedtime resistance, sleep onset latency, close sleeping, so sleeping with a parent or other family member in the house, and then sleeping with items such as bottles or pacifiers. They did show significant decreases in all of the targeted variables, and so overall the treatment package was successful. We do want to say that we want to always consider any other medical variables before implementing behavioral strategies. If there's a medical reason for your child having certain behavioral issues, then this is something that we specifically can't really handle. So making sure that you're checking with your medical professional to rule out any other issues such as sleep apnea prior to intervening behaviorally. So let's look at some practical strategies for parents. First time in bed, or fifth, we're going to look at some bedtime resistance. So does your child cry before or when you leave the room after you put them to bed? Does your child need you to be in the room or in bed with them to fall asleep? And does your child repeatedly ask questions like, what day is it tomorrow? Can we have one more story? I need to pee, things like that when it's time for bed. You answer to these are some things that you can try. So we want to set a routine and stick with that routine, right? So making sure everyone is following the same routine for bedtime. So if you have things like have a snack, put their bedtime or pajamas on, brush their teeth, things like that, everybody is sticking to the order that you have that in. Ensuring all toys and activities are put away at the time that you put them to bed, right? So when we're talking about escape or things like that in the field of behavior analysis, we're thinking about what things children are getting away from and what they're going towards. So if a child doesn't want to go to bed because they've got toys on the ground, great, that makes sense. They put toys and activities away, then you don't have to worry about that as much. When you're answering those questions, right? I have to pee, we have one more story, one more song, one more story, one more song. You're only answering those one time. After that, we've already talked about this, or completely ignoring it. When you're answering those questions, you're ultimately giving them attention. So when you're giving them attention, you're rewarding that behavior. That behavior is going to happen more often in the future. We want to avoid that, right? Those things are keeping them from going to bed, which is also keeping you from going to bed. So answering those one time, and that's it. After you've turned the lights off once, keep the lights off, right? natural in what we want to do when we go back into a room is turn on the lights, right? See what's going on. You're then changing the environment that the child is actually trying to sleep in, right? Wakes us all up when we turn lights on. We're going to avoid that. You can try and introduce and include some meditation and mindfulness tasks. So deep breathing, counting sheep, things like that, right? Those definitely can work and they can be very independent. So teach your child that as well. Do it with them for a while and then try and get them to do it for themselves. It's always increasing that independence and the independence that's around sleep specifically. Things that we don't want to do is keep bringing that one more story, right? That one story tonight becomes 2 stories tomorrow night, and then it becomes 8 stories by next week. We wanted it one story and we're going to keep to that, stick to it. Try not to stay in your child's bed until they fall asleep. This can become really difficult when you're the one falling asleep first. But if you lay down with them, right, nice and quiet, you staying in bed with them, they're going to then rely on you to do that, right? They rely on you to feel safe, which is great, but that's not going to help them for sleep. So if you put them to bed, they're in their bed, you're in yours. Making sure we're not having everyone have a different routine for putting your child to bed. It's one thing when grandparents are over and it's a weeknight, right? And they're going to follow a different routine. That's going to keep your child up for a longer, and they don't have the same expectations. When you have your clear expectations of what the child needs to do, right? Follow that routine. You're going to bed, you're going to sleep. It makes things a lot easier and decreases that bedtime resistance. Also, if they are awake and up and running through the house, right? Or after you put them to bed, right? They're going to go back to their bed. If they're just up and around in their room, try not to go back in. They're just yelling for you, don't go back in, right? That's rewarding that behavior again, like we were talking about earlier, and we don't want to do that. We want to keep things nice and quiet and keep that environment the same as it's expected for the rest of the night. For night awakening, so these are those times that our children are up throughout the night, right? 2 to 3 times seems to be pretty common. If your child's getting up for the night, are they needing you to go back to sleep? So they wake up, they cry, and you go back in and you lay down and everybody falls back asleep. And is this interfering with your own day-to-day activities, not just theirs, right? If you're answering yes to any of these are some things we can try. So try slowly decreasing the amount of time that you're spending in their room after you're turning the lights out. If you normally spend 15 minutes in there, start with 15 minutes, do that for a couple of days, and then decrease it by 1 minute, right? And then slowly decreasing it that way. So that eventually you are spending no time in their room after you've turned out the lights. Using those same techniques between the bedtime routines and night awakenings. So I don't mean, if they wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning, we're going to go in and brush your teeth again and put on your pajamas, etc. Ultimately, we're trying to keep the lights off, right? Staying nice and quiet, following those kinds of things. And if you are in that routine or in that position of spending those 14, 13, whatever minutes in their bedroom at their bedtime, then you can follow the same things for night awakenings, just to keep that nice and clean, expectations the same. And also you can give them some tools for getting back to sleep by themselves. So one of the products that we found are Zenimals. So it comes in this adorable little turtle and has a whole bunch of different meditation and mindfulness activities that your child can do by themselves when they wake up. Other things like reading books, right? If it's something that's really comfortable with, and it's maybe a little later in the day, not so much 2 o'clock in the morning, but other things that give them tools that they're going to be able to get themselves back to sleep. That's fantastic, right? Especially counting sheep, beautiful. Things that we don't want to do is returning to the room as soon as you cry or as soon as they cry for you. This can be difficult. I completely understand. It's not easy to ignore crying. Just like when Stacey was introducing me, I do work day to day with children with autism. It's not easy to ignore crying, and I especially understand that it's not easy to ignore your own child crying. However, remember that these things are, rewarding that behavior. They will calm down eventually, and it is good for their independence. The other thing is that we don't want to be inconsistent with your expectations for them to stay in their room, right? So one night they wake up in the middle of the night, crawl into bed with you, and you put them back to bed. Fantastic, right? That's what we kind of want. We want them to be in their bed. That's the expectation. But the next night they crawl into bed with you and you let them stay. And the following night they crawl into bed really early, so at midnight, and then, at 3 o'clock in the morning when they've kicked you off the bed, then you're putting them back to bed. We don't want that inconsistency. Children with PWS, as I have learned, and I'm sure a lot of you know, are very rule-based. So if that routine stays the same, that expectation stays the same, it's going to be, setting you up for a lot more success in the long run. Finally, some late bedtimes and early wake times. Is your child staying up later than you would like? Is your child waking up earlier than you would like? Think 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning. And is your child waking up other family members early in the morning, doing whatever they are because they're awake, so why not? These are some things that we can try. So keeping them in their bed past their bedtime, or your goal bedtime, for a few days. We don't want a week, right? Because then they wind up switching into that new routine. But if their bedtime, your goal bedtime is 8:30 and they're going to sleep at 9, and then, they're getting up really early, try and push that back a little bit. So they're typically going to sleep at 9, like I said, try and keep them up until 10 o'clock. So that might, be a lot on you to try and keeping them awake, but that's your goal, right? Make them tired for those first few days. After that, right, you can then bring it forward. Throughout this entire thing, we're trying to keep their wake times the same, right? So if their original wake time is 7 o'clock, we're sticking to that 7 o'clock, even when you're keeping them up until 10. After those few days, you can slowly bring the bedtime backwards to the ideal bedtime, right? So that looks like the first 3 days, I'm going to keep them up until 10, and then I'm going to shorten that by 15 minutes. So I'm only going to keep them up until 9:45. Do that for a couple of days, and then shorten it back to 9:30, things like that. Also, we can definitely give them a reinforcer for staying in bed and going to bed as the expectation defines. If they stay in bed for a certain amount of time in the morning, right? So they've gotten up, they stayed in bed, right? They didn't have any night awakenings, or at least not that you know of, because they didn't come and get you at night. 10 minutes of the iPad, something like that in the morning, something that you can ideally withhold for the rest of the day, or at least limit the rest of the day. So it's really, really impactful when they get it in the morning. You can also provide some independent activities, right? So if they get up and they go and watch TV full blast on volume in the morning, that's not really helpful. But puzzles are an excellent way of kids just playing by themselves, being super independent, and it's quiet. Other quiet things, like I said earlier, reading books, right? If that's something that your child can do and that they enjoy, anything like that, anything that's independent can really help just increase that amount of time that they're spending in their bed, that they're not impacting somebody else's sleep. We want to try not to allow daytime sleeping. I know this is difficult, especially with one of the signs of PWS being daytime sleepiness. If daytime sleepiness is a thing and they do need to nap throughout the day, just try and control the duration of that. Instead of letting them sleep until they wake up, make it half an hour at a time, right? Something like that, so that you still know that they're going to be tired enough by the time that it's bedtime to go to sleep. Other things that we don't want to do are changing bedtimes and wake times for different days. So I know that it's really difficult to try and, keep them getting up at 7 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday or a Sunday, because we all want to sleep in as well. However, changing up that routine is going to change up the routine for Monday and Tuesday and make those days a lot more difficult for your child to get up, and also you. Also, we don't want to expect the previous routine to return immediately, right? So if you have, for summer holidays, you let them stay up really late and they're getting up really late, like no problem. However, when they're going back to sleep or going back to school, you're going to want to make sure that you're starting to implement that routine a little bit sooner, right? Maybe not a week before school, but 2 weeks, just to get them back into that routine and that consistency. And don't not include your child in the process. So include them. If they're of the ability to understand what you're saying, make this a team effort, right? The sleep is not just to improve their own sleep, but also to improve yours, and to overall improve quality of life and family dynamics. So by making this more of a team effort, identifying what they want in the morning, identifying, what it is that you can do to help them go back to sleep, and explaining the purpose of what you're doing here can be very beneficial and make that working relationship between you and your child a lot better. For example, let's say my daughter says that, she's thirsty, needs to go to the bathroom, she's hungry, or she just can't sleep after being put to bed. Her bedtime is 8 p.m. So that's the time that she's about going to sleep. Me and her father put her to bed in different ways, right? Doing a whole bunch of other things when he puts her to bed, being way more fun. She wakes up 2 to 3 times per night. She yells for us and then takes 15 minutes to fall back to sleep. Isn't terrible, but not ideal. And then when she's up early, she climbs into bed with us. And sometimes we put her back to bed, sometimes she doesn't. So the solutions or, suggestions that I would make for this kind of a situation: make a routine and stick to it, right? If that routine looks like having a snack, medication, brushing your teeth, one story, a 5-minute back rub and lights out, no matter who is putting her to bed, that is the routine that we're going to stick to. Making sure that both parents follow the same routine. Like I said earlier, other family members putting them to bed, babysitters, things like that, they're all going to follow it. If that means that I have to write this whole thing down and to make sure that people have something to reference, that's exactly what I'm going to do. Just making sure that it's consistent across the board. The first 2 days, I'm going to keep her up until 9 p.m. So like I said before, she's up till 8 p.m. normally. I'm going to do other activities and make it a lot of fun for that extra hour so that she's a lot more tired when it's time to go to bed. We'll also decrease the amount of time that she's awake after she goes, after I put her to bed. I'm going to do this for the first 2 days. After that, for every day after those first 2 days, I'm going to bring the bedtime earlier by 5 minutes. So the third day will look like 8:55. The fourth day, it'll be 8:50, and just slowly bringing it forward that way. For the first 3 days, I'm also going to stay in her room for 15 minutes. I know that that's when she goes to sleep, so that's what I'm going to do. After the third day, and for every third day after that, just so she gets into that little bit of a routine that way, I'm going to shorten it by 1 minute. So days 1 through 3, I'm going to stay in for 15 minutes. On days 4 through 6, I'm going to stay in for 14 minutes. Just slowly decreasing it that way to give her a little bit more of that independence. If she awakens during the night and comes into my room, I'm going to put her back to bed, stay in the room for the same duration, so whether that's 15, 14, 2 minutes, anything like that. I'm going to stay in her room for that, and then I'm going to leave, right? Keep the lights off, and everything's nice and quiet, same expectations. She goes back to bed, she goes back to sleep. If she climbs into our bed, I'm again going to take her back to her bed, stay the same duration as bedtime, and then I'm going to leave because it's the expectation that she's staying in her bed and that she's going to sleep in her bed and that I am going to stay in mine. So just some of the overview of our current study. Ultimately, we are just replicating the strategies that have been successful with kids with ASD, with children with PWS. We are currently in the process of collecting some baseline with two participants and completing the recruitment process with one. These sleep problems that we're targeting are sleep problems that are common in children with PWS. Again, like I said before, previous studies that have found successes with these behavioral sleep treatments in children with autism. And so our current study is targeting 3 children between the ages of 3 and 10 with their parents and caregivers. So these studies, previous studies, like I said, have looked at night awakenings, bedtime resistance, co-sleeping, among other things. We're keeping it nice and close to just these 3. We're increasing the use of bedtime routines. And then the maximum length of the study will run for 35 days from the beginning of baseline till the end of the treatment intervention time. And then the treatments are being individualized for each child based on their goals and routines identified by their parents. So that could vary between the number of times that they're awake during the night, time getting back to sleep, those kinds of things. But they are going to be parent implemented. So I am giving them some packages and they're going to implement those with their child. So the goal of this study, right, is, like I said, we're focusing on implementing bedtime routines, decreasing night awakenings, implementing bedtime fading without response costs. So again, not including that part that children are not eligible for reinforcers in the morning. We're not worried about that. And checking for or testing parent stress. So the overall goal of this study is to decrease night awakenings and bedtime resistance and parent stress by using these treatment packages that have also been used for decreasing the same targeted behaviors with different populations, so mainly those with ASD. These interventions have historically been used with children with autism, but because of the similarities between ASD and because of the history of success in clinical situations with children with PWS in these methods, we do hypothesize success, but we need data to support this hypothesis. So these also can be used, so behavioral interventions specifically can be used in addition to your child's medications, so that we're not concerned about a conflict between these two interventions, right? The medical and the behavioral. So you can be using them at the same time. Ultimately, the purpose for doing this, there are no published studies that exist to guide parents and professionals on ways to help their children with PWS to sleep better, except for medical interventions. There are very few published studies examining the efficacy of behavior analytic treatments on individuals with PWS in general. We know that sleep is essential for growth and development, for the quality of life and their family dynamics. And the successes of sleep treatments with children with PWS, extended children, or in general, successes of sleep treatments with children, we are hoping to extend to children with other behavioral issues. So not just ASD, we're hoping for PWS and any other potential developmental diagnoses that children may have or receive. We're hoping that we can use these behavioral interventions to help them. Our hypothesized goals and outcomes, ideally, will be decreasing night awakenings, decreasing bedtime resistance, decreasing bedtime duration, decreasing parent stress, and then hopefully increasing their overall sleep quality by decreasing these other variables. Unfortunately, just because of issues that have happened in starting this study, the data will be presented in the future. However, we just don't have them right now. My final thoughts and my final suggestions. So if you're going to implement these things or try these suggestions, make sure you're identifying your concerns. What are the issues that you're having at night? What are the problems that you're having, related to yourself and that you can try and help to fix? Identifying your goals. Where do you want to be and by trying to implement these intervention strategies? Involving your child in the process as best as you can. Just like I said earlier, if they're of that ability to understand and give feedback on what you're doing, definitely involve them. If they're not, making sure that you're explaining why you're doing this, right? This isn't working, we're going to try this. Something like that. And I know Dr. Singh talked about it earlier, but we do love data. Data is our big thing. It can show those patterns of behavior and show when things are working and when things are not. And it's the easiest way to take all of
to your families, right? So to your doctor, and make sure that they are able to understand and see whether there's certain interventions that are working and certain interventions that are not. I would like to extend a huge thank you to PWSA for helping with the recruitment for this project and also holding this amazing sleep summit. And thank you definitely for, inviting me to speak and your support with PWS and their families. I would also like to give a small thank you to Dr. Cruz and Dr. Bedard, who are my research chairs on this and have supported me along the way.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for your presentation. Very exciting work. We're excited to see, the outcomes of the study, and you guys are doing some great things with your work in PWS. So thank you so much for being here. I know we have a couple questions. So if you don't mind, we'll just jump into those really quick. The first one, my son wants to get up and use the bathroom. He's 15 years old. He can't wander around the house, so we have to with him. He should not have to go to the bathroom. There are no medical reasons, but he wakes up and then notices he has to use the toilet. Any suggestions?
Sorry, my headphones are doing funny things. Can you repeat the question, Paige?
Oh, sure. Yeah, absolutely. So the question is, my son wants to get up and use the restroom. He is 15 years old and he can't wander around the house. So we have to get up with him. He should not have to go to the bathroom. There are no medical reasons, but he wakes up and then notices that he has to use the toilet. So any suggestions you might have for that?
Tricky. If he's now in that routine of getting up and going to the bathroom, like that might be something that, there could be, if there's no medical reasons for it, it's just that routine that he's into. So I would suggest that if he's getting up throughout the night and going to the bathroom, that perhaps there are other things that he can do in the meantime, right? So if he's not up, just try and shorten that amount of time that he is up, right? Going to the bathroom and then going back to bed, giving him other things to do. If maybe he's drinking a lot of water beforehand, right? Monitoring that water intake. that when he gets up or wakes up during the night, he does have to go to the bathroom. So I would definitely monitor that, try and like take some data on it just based on when he's drinking, when he's like that.
Go.
Thank-
Bathroom before he goes to bed.
All right, thank you.
Diana. The next question is, what if your child rises early no matter what time they go to bed? So if you're, perhaps doing moving the bedtime a little bit earlier each night, or even the hour later, but they still get at the same time, how do you keep them in bed longer?
Definitely try and give them something to do. I know that there are other products like the clocks that are out there, right? That's like green for getting up and red for stay in bed. Those are some really good products to get a hold of to try and make sure that they understand that expectation that they're staying in bed. If they're just awake and there's no chance that they're going back to bed, I definitely try and get them some kind of independent activity so that they're not waking up the rest of the house. It could just be that that's their rhythm, right? And there's not a whole lot we can do to change that. You can definitely try moving them even farther back and keeping that in place for a little bit longer than, a day or so. But if that's they're just getting up at that time, definitely just give them something to do to try and keep them in bed for a little bit longer. And it might even make them tired.
Thank you. I don't see other questions, but I just wanted to say thank you for doing this. And for those who are watching, like Aliana said, that the data is so important. So please be sure that even if you're not participating in Aliana's study, that you're taking your own data when you're doing this. It's really, really helpful.
Great. Yeah, I don't see any other questions right now. So we'll give it couple seconds. Anybody have a question? No. Okay. Well, I know, again, it's been a fantastic day with great speakers, great presentations. And as I look at the participant list, I see several people that have been with us all day. So thank you for sticking out this entire day. And again, all these presentations will be available. And hope everyone has a happy, great, safe evening. And thank you again. And we will talk to everybody soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.